happened on a Wednesday morning in March, the kind of cold that doesn't feel like winter anymore but hasn't decided to be spring yet. I was coming down the stairs with a laundry basket in my arms, which my daughter had told me 100 times not to do. Mum, that's how people get hurt. I always said I was fine. I was 67. I wasn't fragile. I missed the second step from the bottom. That's all it was. One miscalculation in 38 years of walking down those stairs. The basket went one way, I went the other. My left wrist caught the banister on the way down, then snapped under my weight when I hit the floor. The pain shot up my arm like electricity. I lay there at the bottom of my own staircase, in my own house, in Knoxville, Tennessee, unable to get up, listening to the washing machine hum in the laundry room like nothing had happened. My phone was in the kitchen. Of course it was. I don't know how long I was there before I started screaming. Long enough for the cold from the hardwood floor to seep through my robe. Long enough to realize I was completely alone and that no one was coming. My neighbor Lucille heard me through the wall we shared on the east side of the house. She was 79 years old, hard of hearing, and she still heard me. She called 911 from her kitchen phone and then came and sat on my porch and talked to me through the door until the ambulance arrived. At the hospital, they told me I had a displaced fracture in my wrist and a hairline fracture in my elbow from the impact. Surgery. Plates and screws. 6 to 8 weeks of recovery minimum. The intake nurse asked for my emergency contact. I gave her my daughter's name. My daughter and her husband live 40 minutes away in Maryville. The hospital called my daughter's cell phone 9 times before the surgery. She didn't answer. They left 3 voicemails. They called my son-in-law's number, which I'd listed as a secondary contact. 1 voicemail there. They tried twice more in the hours after I came out of recovery. I woke up from anesthesia to a room that was empty except for a nurse adjusting my IV line. My arm was wrapped and elevated. Everything tasted like metal. I asked the nurse if my daughter had come. She had the practiced expression of someone who delivers bad news gently and often. We haven't been able to reach her yet. We'll keep trying. I turned my head toward the window. It was already dark outside. I had gone in for surgery at 11 in the morning. What I didn't know yet was that while I was in that operating room, my daughter had posted a photo on her social media. She and her husband standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon, her head tilted against his shoulder, the sun setting behind them in shades of orange and pink. The caption read, "Disconnecting to reconnect. No phones, no noise, just us and the canyon. Best decision we ever made." It had been posted at 2:17 in the afternoon, while I was in surgery, while the hospital was still calling. The post had 46 likes by the time someone showed it to me. Before I tell you what happened after, I want to ask something of you. If stories about protecting yourself and finding out who really loves you mean something to you, please take a moment to subscribe to Emerald Revenge and leave a like on this video, and drop your city or state in the comments. I always love knowing where my listeners are coming from. Also, some names and details in this story have been changed to protect privacy, but the truth of it, the emotional truth, is completely real. My name is not important. What matters is that I was a school librarian for 31 years in Knox County. I retired at 64, 3 years before this happened. My husband Lawrence passed away 4 years ago from a sudden cardiac event. He was 66. He was mowing the backyard on a Saturday in June, and he was just gone. And I was inside making lemonade, and the world split cleanly in 2, before and after. We had 1 child, a daughter. She was 38 when this happened, living 40 minutes away with her husband and their 2 kids, my grandchildren, a boy of 10 and a girl of 7. For the first year after Lawrence died, she called every few days. She came on Sundays sometimes. Then the calls got shorter, then less frequent. Then I was the one calling, always the one calling, and she was always just about to head into something. Soccer practice, a work dinner. The kids needed baths. She'd call me back. She didn't always call back. Her husband was polite to me in the way that people are polite to someone they find inconvenient. Perfectly calibrated courtesy. He remembered to ask how I was doing and then visibly stopped listening about 4 seconds into my answer. I told myself it was just his personality. Some people are reserved. I told myself that for 3 years. The first person I saw when I came fully awake in that hospital room was not my daughter. It was a woman named Agnes, who had been my student assistant in the school library 17 years ago. She was 12 when I first met her, a small, quiet girl who came to the library every lunch period because the cafeteria was too loud for her. I let her help me shelve books. We talked about what she was reading. When she got to high school, she still stopped by. When she graduated college, she sent me a card. When Lawrence died, she drove 2 hours from Nashville and sat with me through the visitation. She was 33 years old now, standing in my hospital room with a paper cup of coffee and dark circles under her eyes, wearing the same clothes she'd probably been in since the previous afternoon. "How did you know?" My voice was sandpaper. "Lucille called me," she said. "She had my number from the Christmas card list you gave her last year. I got here around 7 last night." I looked at the clock. It was 6:15 in the morning. "You've been here all night." I slept in the chair for a bit. She said it like it was nothing. Like sleeping in a hospital chair, watching over someone who wasn't even her family, was just a reasonable thing to do on a Tuesday. "My daughter?" I asked. Agnes's face changed. Just slightly, the way a face changes when someone is deciding how honest to be. "The hospital's been trying her. And your son-in-law." No answer. No answer. She hesitated. Then she set down the coffee cup and picked up her phone. "There's something I think you should see. I didn't want to show you right away, but—" It was my daughter's social media page. I don't follow it because she stopped accepting my follow requests 2 years ago, said she liked to keep her personal life separate. Agnes had found it because it was set to public. The Grand Canyon photo. Post at 2:17, 46 likes, now 60-something. Scrolling up, more photos. My daughter and her husband at a restaurant in Sedona the night before. A resort pool. A spa menu laid flat on a white towel with the caption, "Self-care is a full-time job and I'm finally clocking in." My son-in-law grinning at the camera with a golf club over his shoulder. Posted that same morning. His caption, "Fairways and fresh air. This is the life." I counted the posts, 11 photos and captions over 48 hours. 11, and not one answered phone call from a hospital where their emergency contact, my daughter's own mother, was lying with a broken arm and surgical hardware in her bones. "No obligations," I said, reading one of the captions aloud. It was from a sunset photo taken on their first evening there. "Time to remember what matters." I was quiet for a long time. Agnes sat beside me without trying to fill the silence with reassurance, which was the right thing to do. What started surfacing then were not the big moments, not the grand betrayals. It was the small ones, accumulated over years, that I had smoothed over and reframed until they were almost unrecognizable as what they actually were. 6 months after Lawrence died, I asked my daughter if I could come for Thanksgiving. She said they were doing it small that year, just the four of them. I ate a frozen turkey dinner alone and watched the parade on television and told myself it was fine, that she needed her own traditions, that I was being too needy. The following summer, I asked about taking my grandchildren to the Children's Museum for a day. My son-in-law said they had a lot going on. I could never pin down what exactly. Things just seemed to always be going on. I asked about attending my granddaughter's school play. "There's not much seating," my daughter said. "It's really just for immediate family." I am immediate family, I thought, but didn't say. I smiled and said I understood. 2 years ago, my daughter called me on a Sunday, which was unusual enough that my heart lifted when I saw her name on the screen. She asked how I was. Then she asked, with what felt like practice casualness, whether I'd ever thought about downsizing. "The house is a lot to keep up with by yourself, Mum." "What is it, 2,200 square feet?" "That neighborhood's really appreciated. Donna Kimball's place 3 streets over sold for $480 in the spring. Did you see that?" I had not seen that. I didn't understand why she was telling me. "It's just a lot of house for one person," she said. "And with everything you'd net from a sale, you could set yourself up really comfortably somewhere smaller, somewhere with a community. People your age." I told her I wasn't interested in selling. She said, of course, just something to think about, and changed the subject. But the call felt different after that. Transactional. like she had needed something from me and hadn't gotten it and was now just waiting for the conversation to end. I sat with that feeling for a few days and then filed it away with all the other feelings I had filed away. I thought about all of it lying in that hospital bed, my arm elevated, Agnes asleep again in the chair beside me. When had I stopped being a mother to her and started being an asset to be managed? On my second day in the hospital, my neighbor Lucille came to visit, shuffling in with her walker and a Tupperware of snickerdoodles she had somehow baked and transported across town. We talked for a while. She updated me on the neighborhood. Then she got quiet. "I need to tell you something that's been sitting with me," she said. About 6 weeks before my fall, my son-in-law had called Lucille, out of the blue. They had met twice at a cookout the first summer after Lawrence died, and once when my daughter stopped by to drop something off and he waited in the car. He barely knew the woman. He'd been friendly on the phone, she said. Charming, almost. He asked how she was doing, how the neighborhood was. Then he asked about me. Specifically, he asked whether she had noticed any changes in me lately, whether I seemed confused, whether I'd had trouble remembering things, forgetting to lock the door, leaving appliances on. Lucille told him she didn't know what he was talking about. She said I was the sharpest person on the street, and I had reminded her to call her pharmacist last month because she'd missed a refill. He seemed, she said, slightly disappointed by this. He asked one more question before he got off the phone. Had Lucille noticed any falls or near falls? I closed my eyes when she told me that part. I told him no, she said, because there hadn't been any. Not then. Lucille left. Agnes was getting us both coffee from the machine down the hall. I sat in the silence and let the pieces arrange themselves, because they were arranging themselves whether I wanted them to or not. When Agnes came back, she set my coffee down and then said quietly, "There's something else." She'd gone to my house the previous afternoon to pick up clothes and my toiletry bag. In my mailbox, she had found a large envelope, return address from a place called Hearthside Manor, a senior living and memory care community in West Knoxville. The envelope had been sitting in the mailbox for at least a few days, based on how it looked. She handed it to me. I opened it with my good hand. Inside was a welcome packet, glossy photos of smiling elderly residents at card tables and garden plots, a floor plan for a single occupancy suite, and tucked behind the brochure, a printed inquiry form, partially completed. My name, my age, my address. Under reason for inquiry, several boxes were checked. Memory concerns, history of falls, difficulty managing household independently, family-initiated placement. My history of falls. As of the date on that form's postmark, I had no history of falls. I had never fallen in that house in 13 years of living there alone. Under family contact initiating inquiry, my son-in-law's name, his phone number, his email address, and his handwriting because the form had been partially filled out by hand before being printed. The postmark was dated 9 days before I fell on those stairs. I read the financial disclosure section, questions about property value, equity, savings accounts, life insurance policies, long-term care coverage. Agnes watched my face. "He's been building a case," I said. "I think so." The phone calls to Lucille, asking about falls, about confusion. He needed evidence that I was declining. "And when you actually fell?" "They didn't rush home," I said. "They stayed, because a hospitalization, a fracture, a surgery, that's not a crisis to interrupt their vacation. That's useful." The shape of it was ugly and very clear. Get me declared incompetent or dependent. Move me into a facility. Sell the house, which by current market estimates in my neighborhood was worth somewhere between $510 and $540. Split the proceeds in whatever way they had decided was fair to themselves. What they had not planned for was Lucille, or Agnes, or the fact that I had spent 31 years teaching children to find information, to ask questions, and to think carefully about what they were being told. I called my attorney, a woman who had handled Lawrence's estate and who I had known for 15 years. I told her I needed to rewrite my will and update my power of attorney documents, and I needed to do it as soon as I was discharged. We met in her office 8 days after my fall. I was in a sling, still managing the pain with medication, but I was there and I was clear-headed, and I had thought carefully about what I wanted to say. I had also, at my attorney's suggestion, completed a formal cognitive evaluation with a neuropsychologist 2 days prior. I passed comprehensively. The report documented strong performance across all assessed domains and stated explicitly that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment. My attorney attached it to my file. The will I signed that day was different from the one Lawrence and I had written together 12 years before. To my grandson, a trust of $100,000 for educational expenses, managed by my attorney as sole trustee, with disbursement controlled by the trustee's discretion until he turned 25. To my granddaughter, the same, neither trust accessible to their parents under any circumstances. To Agnes, $55,000, because she slept in a hospital chair for 12 hours and never once suggested she had anything better to do. To Lucille, $25,000 and the antique writing desk in my study that she had admired for 9 years. To Knox County Public Library's Children's Literacy Fund, $60,000 in Lawrence's name. To my daughter and son-in-law, nothing, not out of cruelty, out of accuracy. You receive from an estate what you put into a relationship. The math wasn't complicated. My daughter called 11 days after my fall. Mum, I can't believe what happened. We were completely off the grid. There was no service where we were staying. You posted 11 times in 2 days, I said. I've seen the photos. The Grand Canyon, Sedona, the golf course, the spa. Silence. That was just I had downloaded those to post later. Scheduled posts I didn't even. Your phone rang 9 times from the hospital. There were 4 voicemails. Longer silence. I need to come see you. We need to talk. Can we come Saturday? Come Saturday, I said. We do need to talk. They arrived at 11:30, without the children. My son-in-law had a pressed shirt on. My daughter was wearing a blazer over dark jeans, the kind of outfit she wore to parent-teacher conferences when she wanted to seem put together. They sat in my living room, on the couch Lawrence and I had picked out together, and my son-in-law looked around the room with the unhurried proprietary gaze of someone who has already imagined the space emptied out. I offered them coffee. I had also, before they arrived, asked Agnes to sit in the kitchen and stay. We talked first about my recovery. My daughter leaned forward and asked about the surgery, the hardware in my wrist, the physical therapy schedule, and I answered all of it and watched her do the calculation behind her eyes that she thought I couldn't see. Incapacitated. Alone. Single-story living a challenge with that staircase. Right on schedule. Then my son-in-law said gently that they'd been thinking about my situation and they wanted to talk about what my longer-term needs might look like, because of course they worried about me, and there were some really wonderful options these days. I put the envelope on the coffee table between us. My son-in-law looked at it. His face didn't move. Harside Manor, I said. The inquiry form you submitted 9 days before I fell. Memory concerns, history of falls, difficulty managing household independently, your name on the contact line, your handwriting. My daughter looked at her husband. That was just research, he said. We were being proactive. We care about your well-being. You checked a box that said I had a history of falls, I said. I had never fallen in this house. That was a lie, written by you, submitted to a memory care facility to build a record suggesting I was declining. Margaret, he started. My name, I said, is not Margaret. My daughter made a sound. You called Lucille, I continued. You asked if I seemed confused, if I forgot things, if I left the stove on. You needed witnesses. You were constructing evidence. And when I actually ended up in a hospital, you didn't come home because a broken bone was useful to your timeline, not an emergency that required your presence. My son-in-law's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation. There are 4 voicemails on your phone from Knox General Hospital, 11 social media posts from the same 48-hour window, a form with your handwriting asking about my financial assets. I don't need a jury. My daughter's eyes were wet. Whether from guilt or the specific panic of being found out, I genuinely could not tell any more. The house isn't yours, I said. It was never going to be yours. And I want you to understand that I'm saying that, not out of anger, but because I think you needed to hear it clearly. One time, from me directly. I told them about the will, not every detail, but enough. The trusts for the grandchildren, managed by someone other than them, the gifts to Agnes and Lucille and the library, what they would receive. My son-in-law stood up. You've clearly been influenced. That woman in the kitchen. Agnes appeared in the doorway. She had heard her cue. Agnes was a 12-year-old girl who came to my library because she needed somewhere quiet, I said. She drove 90 miles and sat with me overnight in a hospital. I don't have to defend that to you. My daughter said very quietly, what about our kids? What about what this does to our family? Your children will have trusts for their education that you can't touch. That's me providing for them. That's me showing up for them the way I know how. What happens to your family is something you and your husband will have to work out between yourselves. They left 20 minutes later. My son-in-law did not say goodbye. My daughter paused at the door, and for a second she looked like the little girl she had been, the one who used to fall asleep reading on my lap. That child was in there somewhere, but she had married a man who treated my life as a logistics problem, and she had let it happen, year by year, Sunday by Sunday, until there were no more Sundays. The door closed. Agnes brought the coffee cups into the kitchen and did not make me talk about it. The following months were not simple. I won't pretend they were. Recovery is tedious even when your heart is steady. Physical therapy for my wrist twice a week. Relearning how to carry things, how to type, how to grip a coffee mug without wincing. My granddaughter sent me a drawing through the mail. A house with a big yellow sun above it, a cat in the window, and a stick figure on the porch, labelled Grandma. She had addressed the envelope herself in crooked block letters. Her parents didn't know she'd done it. Agnes had given her my address. I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cardinal, which had been Lawrence's favorite bird. I did not sell the house. I thought about it and decided not to. I had the staircase railing reinforced. I put a grip rail in the shower. I did not move into a single occupancy suite at Hearthside Manor or anywhere else. I started a Tuesday evening reading group at the Knox County Library branch 4 blocks away. 6 women, ranging from 58 to 81, who came to sit in a circle and talk about books and, sometimes, about the actual texture of their lives. It turned out I was not the only one who had spent years being carefully, cordially set aside by the people who were supposed to show up. Lucille came for dinner every other Wednesday. We played cards badly and watched old game show reruns and argued about whether the host of a program we both liked had gotten a haircut or not. Agnes came on Sundays when she could. She brought her dog, a large, clumsy golden retriever who was afraid of the cardinal magnet on my refrigerator and had to be talked past it every visit. Lawrence would have found this enormously funny, and so I found it funny on his behalf. My son-in-law's name never came up in my house again. My daughter called once, about 2 months after the living room conversation. She asked if I wanted to have lunch. I said I needed more time. She said she understood. I don't know if she did or not. That question doesn't keep me up anymore. What keeps me up occasionally is the grief of it, because that's what it is. Not anger. Anger was clean, and it moved through me, and it did useful things while it was there, like getting me to an attorney's office and getting the right words said in the right room. But grief is slower. Grief is waking up at 3 in the morning and remembering the way she used to read to her little brother. She didn't have a brother, but she practiced on her stuffed animals, and she was very serious about it. And the memory is so specific and so far away that it catches in my throat before I'm ready. I am grieving someone who is still alive. I have been told that's one of the harder kinds. A pastor in my reading group said something that I've turned over many times since. He said that sometimes we hold on to a version of a person so tightly that we don't notice when the actual person has long since walked out of the frame. The grief isn't for who they are, it's for who we needed them to be. I think that's right. I think I needed my daughter to be someone she had decided not to be, and I kept the door open so long that I didn't notice how cold the house had gotten. I'm 67. I have a wrist that aches when it's going to rain, which Lawrence would have said was its own kind of weather service. I have a reading group on Tuesday evenings, and a neighbor who brings snickerdoodles, and the young woman who argues with my refrigerator magnets. I have grandchildren who send me drawings in the mail. I have a library that will have a children's literacy fund in Lawrence's name for as long as it stands. I have on my kitchen table a printed itinerary for a trip to Asheville in the fall, a bed and breakfast that Lawrence and I always meant to get to, a town I want to walk through slowly and alone and feel whatever I feel in it. I'm not afraid of traveling alone. I'm not afraid of the stairs. I'm not afraid of the quiet in the evenings, which took a long time to stop being a reminder of what was missing and start being simply what the evenings are, mine and still. If you're somewhere in what I've described, the shrinking, the making excuses, the Sunday afternoons that don't come anymore, I want you to know something. The people who show up at 3 in the morning, who drive 90 miles, who sit with you in uncomfortable chairs, those people are your family. The paperwork of it, the bloodline of it, the obligation of it, none of that is the point. The point is, who came? And it's not too late to rearrange your life around who that actually is. I think about the envelope a lot, not the contents of it. I've made my peace with those, but the act of opening it. One hand in a sling, sitting in a hospital bed, pulling back the flap of something that was supposed to arrive before I even knew I needed to be afraid. That moment keeps coming back to me, not as anger anymore, but as clarity. What happened to me wasn't random. I spent 3 years making it easier and easier for my daughter and her husband to treat me as a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved. Every time I swallowed my hurt and said it was fine, every time I accepted a shortened visit or a missed holiday, or a conversation that ended the second it became inconvenient for them, I was teaching them that I had no edges, that I would absorb whatever they gave me and ask for nothing back. People learn what we allow. That's not blame, it's just how it works. I allowed a great deal. And here is the other side of that same truth. Agnes showed up because I had once, without keeping score, shown up for her. I stayed late. I sat with her. I made phone calls on her behalf when she was 12 years old and had nobody. I didn't do it expecting anything in return, and that's exactly why what she gave back was real. What we put into the world with genuine care has a way of finding us again when we're on the floor. Not as magic, not as reward, but as the natural consequence of having built something true. What I needed most during those months, and what I had to find inside myself before I could do any of it. Talk to the attorney, sit across from my son-in-law, say the things I said, was not rage. Rage came and went. What stayed was something quieter and harder to name. It was the willingness to see clearly, to look at the inquiry form and understand exactly what it meant without flinching away from it. It was the decision to trust my own mind when someone had been working to make me doubt it, that kind of clear-sightedness, the ability to think carefully and act on what you actually know rather than what you wish were true, that saved me more than anything else did. But thinking clearly isn't enough on its own. You have to be willing to stand in the room. I sat across from my daughter and son-in-law and said the things out loud, the specific things, the dollar amounts, the postmark date, the 9 unanswered calls, and I didn't soften any of it. That took something I had to rebuild slowly, from the floor of my own staircase upward. The belief that I was worth protecting, that my life, at 67 with a wrist in a sling and a cat who sat beside my head like I'd done something inconvenient, was still worth arranging carefully and intentionally around what was real and good. Lucille baked me snickerdoodles and came across town on a walker. Agnes slept in a chair for 12 hours. Lawrence, who has been gone 4 years, still shows up in the cardinal magnet on my refrigerator and in the reading chair I kept and in the fund that bears his name. The people who love you leave traces everywhere, if you stop long enough to notice. I'm not the same person I was before I missed that step. I don't think I'm worse for it. I think I'm more honest with myself about what I need, about what I will and won't absorb. That honesty cost me something real. It also gave me back my own life, which I had quietly been letting slip out of my hands for years without quite admitting it. It is not too late to notice what's actually in your hands, and it is not too late to hold on.